Listen, to get into it, when you guys are putting, maybe we'll start with you, Rowan, from a producer's point of view, and you, Michelle, as well. Could both of you can speak to this. When you guys are putting a film together or starting a project, how much are you thinking about awards, and how much do you keep the awards in mind? Is this something that you're thinking about when you're putting it together, or does it kind of happen organically?
Well, I think it's important for all production companies, particularly talent production companies, I would say. Yet at the same time, our production company, we're relatively young, particularly Julia. So I think a lot about younger audiences. And I think younger audiences care more about likes than laurels. I think younger audiences are also sort of against elitism a little bit more and are a little suspect of thus the awards process. So I think, they look to pandering a little. Like, I think if you try to pander or think too much about the awards process, then you sort of lose sight of your messaging, which is ultimately, I think, very important to a younger audience that has, more agency than ever before, than any other audience, I think, ever before. And so how do you let them sort of control that narrative and let that lead the awards process is something we think about a lot.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Michelle?
I would say something like it's never too early, or I prefer to be too early than too late. So I would consider it from the beginning. Most important would be to be sure we want to tell the same story. And then, yes, from the beginning you will fight for it, and you have objectives and a strategy to go till the end. And sometimes the end is the first festival, but sometimes the end is the Academy Awards.
Mm-hmm. What about you guys? Howard, maybe you could speak a little bit to this. When you've gotten involved in projects before and you have seen them go kind of the full distance, when you've worked on these projects, has that been in your thoughts when you're getting involved in an early stage, that this will go down to, the big award ceremonies, like the Oscars? And
well, that's the hope. I mean, we've at Focus we've been around for a little over 20 years. We've had 156 Academy Award nominations, of which we won 27. So it's definitely part of our DNA, and it's something we're thinking about, but not too much about. We're really just kind of focused on making the best films, and we make our decisions, that way, more about what would make the best film and not thinking so much about awards when we're making films.
Okay. So, Howard, can you tell me a little bit about, in terms of greenlighting a project or acquiring a project, for how important are awards for you when you're deciding to greenlight something or acquire something?
That's, as I was saying, it's a nice result if that happens, but it is not at all a driving factor in our greenlighting productions or deciding to acquire a film at a festival or not. Our greenlight is we're focusing on do we think that the film could be financially successful regardless of whether it becomes an awards film. So it doesn't really, and then if we're making the film, we're making the best possible film, and if the awards come, great. That's just nice and extra.
What about festivals? I mean, there was a panel this morning that my colleague moderated about festivals and their kind of their future and how they can buoy a film. I mean, for festivals, for you guys, how important are the international film festivals in terms of building momentum for a film? Maybe we could start with you, Michelle, for that one.
Like we say at the Academy, we all dream in gold. So yes, at the end of the road, but basically you cannot just jump there and show there and say like, here I am. So you have to prepare around the line. Me, I was basically preparing that 18 months before the Oscar. Of course, a lot of time in Cannes or something like that. People used to say Cannes was too far away from the Oscars because you have to keep the momentum. But as Howard said, like the momentum, you can have few momentums. You want the movie to be seen. Now it's difficult in the theaters, but when you're at the festival, you have more people because there is an experience, there is something, you can talk, you can add panels, you can add things, so people will come and see. I mean, the most important point is you want the voters to watch your movie, because otherwise it will not work.
David, can you tell us, I know you work mainly in TV now, but you have a very kind of, as you say, storied past in the film world. Could you tell us a little bit about the experience with, you mentioned Once earlier, and kind of that obviously premiered at Sundance and then had an amazing journey. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about what it was that kind of gave that such momentum, and did you see it going as far as it did? Was that, and when you were making it, was it something you thought we might, this small budget film, we might have a chance?
I sat outside with the producer before the very first screening in Sundance, and he was contemplating selling the film to Red Envelope at the time, because every distributor he'd sent it to passed. And then I said, let's wait for the first screening, see how the audience reacts. There was the first screening, there was a standing ovation. Glenn and Mar sang the song after the screening. Second screening, a standing ovation. Third screening, the phone started ringing, and a lot of the distributors who had passed were calling and saying, "Oh, we love the film." And I said, "Okay, great," and hung up the phone. And it created this, really nice situation where Fox Searchlight, Sony Classics, Focus were all interested in the film, and it was a tiny little movie. Patrick Waxberger was involved and bought the international in the film, and then partnered with Searchlight. And then it was a film that just kind of caught this huge momentum. And there was a friend of mine who was, and you couldn't, but in terms of soliciting votes, you can't send out DVDs. You can, there's very strict rules on how you do it. And so a friend of mine who had fallen, and a lot of people just became fascinated and fell in love with the film. And so a friend of mine was hosting a party in Malibu, and she said, "Look, I love the film. I think there's going to be some people at the party who are Academy voters. Why don't we, have a little, have Glenn come and sing a song?" And so we literally kind of, in the dead of night, came up to this, giant house on a cliff, and she was the caterer, and so we snuck in the back door, and Glenn took out his guitar and sang in front of what turned out to be some very significant Oscar voters, and lo and behold, the song got nominated and then won the Oscar. So it was, the movie cost, tiny amount of money, $250,000. So, for it to go from there to that was, the ultimate dream. And I'm not sure the director's ever forgiven Glenn for not acknowledging him in the thank you speech, but it was fun nonetheless.
So that's interesting, because it leads me to the next question, which is about budgets. Is there a link between, clearly in this instance, that's such a tiny budget for a film, and for, as you say, for it to go that far, but that's kind of maybe an exception, I would imagine, to the rest of the cases, and maybe you guys could agree or disagree on that, but do you think what's the link between budgets of a film and their success in the awards game? Does there have to be a certain budget to work within?
We were talking about this earlier. I think there's probably several different opinions on this matter, but I think it's very hard to do a movie like under tier 1 to have that launch a successful campaign. I just think it's hard to make the movie look good enough to win an Academy Award. There's notable exceptions, To Leslie was nominated for awards, and I can't remember the exact budget on that, but it was lower than 5 significantly. But typically that's the threshold now, and it changes every year, but I would say presently I can't imagine making something for under 5. I just would assume no way that this is going to win major awards. Again, there are obvious exceptions, and even To Leslie, the DP on that is the same DP in Everything Everywhere All at Once, Larkin. So they were punching above their budget, if you will, class. So I don't know how you feel.
I would say, luckily enough, it's still story first. Mm-hmm. It's the most important thing. But yes, definitely the money makes a big difference at the end as well, because they will not fight, or it will be difficult to raise money or to go for a small budget movie. Mm-hmm. If you have a bigger budget, it's going to be...
The money spent on the campaign is what we see, but you can see with the Parasite versus, The Irishman, and, that year, Parasite was a brilliantly run campaign, perfectly timed, and then you had vast millions of dollars spent on, those other movies, and they didn't necessarily kind of get what they wanted out of the spend. So, I think you can't coerce an audience, and you can't really, you can make an impact in terms of, getting it known, getting screenings, having it out there, but ultimately voters are going to decide what they want to watch and give the awards to.
And I think with the production budget, it really just matters how much is on screen and what the production values are, because it could be a low budget film where, and actually that's a big part of my job at Focus is getting all the above the line and the rights and stuff down to very low, so that the money can actually be used to be on screen, and and to have so the film has great production values. So even on a lower budget film, if it's all on screen, that'll fare better in awards consideration.
Yeah. Okay. I wanted to also ask a little bit about David. This one's for you. So, for the film, so you work a lot in television right now, and from an awards perspective, it's so different, the Emmys versus the Oscars. I mean, we were talking about this earlier, and the run-up often for film campaigns can, they sort of can buoy the release. They kind of play alongside the release, and they have an impact on who goes and sees them in cinemas. Whereas oftentimes with the Emmys and stuff, these are awards that are coming, a year maybe after something has been broadcast. Do people care as much about these Emmy Awards? Is there enough, the attitude's a little different? How does it work?
I think we care about it in that it's an acknowledgement by your peers about something that, went well. I think it's a very different analysis. It's not like when you have an awards film and then you re-release it and, capture all of that new awareness. So, I think it's, my colleague Mark, who ran Mayor, obviously that was Mayor of Easttown, was a great success, and it was great to see, the acknowledgement for all of the actors and their great work. But it didn't necessarily kind of necessitate a new lease of life to the series. So, but I think we all appreciate it. It's just a very different, there's a different sort of a campaign. There's a different sort of, momentum to it. So it's hard.
If they get nominated, they pretty much have to get renewed. So in some sense, it has a different life. But,
Yeah.
but I agree with you.
Yeah.
And maybe, Rowan, we were talking about this earlier, though. I mean, what's there's a different weight in terms of if you're an Oscar winner versus an Emmy winner, and especially if you're moving between the two as actors and directors so often do now. Maybe you could.
I think there's a certain snobbery maybe that exists within the film community about the Emmys. I don't know. Certainly an Oscar helps you much more in your film and TV career, whereas I think an Emmy helps very much in your TV career, and it's definitely not bad. It's great for film, but it doesn't have the same weight, So I don't think it goes both ways exactly.
Mm-hmm. So ultimately, awards campaigning is competitive, right? I mean, that's the nature of it, and no matter how you cut it, people want to win. When you start going to the races. Do people get aggressive about it? And is this healthy competition? I mean, is this healthy for the market to be to be going through this process, given the state of independent cinema? I mean, are these things that energies should be put on? Who wants to?
You mean
start?
Awards or negative campaigns?
Awards.
I think negative campaigns have become a lot less than they were. I think there was a certain individual who I won't name who was pretty aggressive about it, but you can see that there's a sort of rhetoric that's formed around certain films. You can see from Joker and Irishman, Parasite. There was, Parasite was like perfectly run. It was under the radar. It was kind of kept like within a club. And if you saw Parasite and you didn't talk about the ending, whereas there was this really and so there was other films there that people started poking holes in, and then the phase 2 of that award campaign. Phase 1 is getting the award. Phase 2 is when you've been nominated, and then it becomes a very kind of focused narrative on what it is and trying to sort of undermine some of your other. But it's become less, I think, negative and aggressive than it used to have been. But I'm sorry, I don't know if that answers your question completely, but
Would you guys agree, or?
I think one of the important point are the new or the definition we give to this. Like for example, for an indie movie, like if we take the Independent Spirit Awards, it will be a budget of less than 20 million. For other, so I think often we all think we talk about the same thing, but we use other definitions. So if it comes to competitive, I would say no, because I can't. We don't have enough to be competitive, so I would more use the creative or to be different than this huge machine. I'm not treating you a huge machine, but they have so much money, we have to do it differently because anyway we will not have this budget. Like if you talk about Best International, some country have a budget of 50K, and that's it. And some other will have 1 million, but it doesn't mean you will fail or you will win or you won't win. Yeah, it's going to be more difficult. So my level winning was to have a nomination.
And it's different, though, isn't it? Obviously, the international perspective versus the U.S. I mean, what is it? What does a nomination do for a film in terms of its lease of life on the international Oscar?
You can do a release after. If it's not sold everywhere, you can sell it. But basically, often for Best International, you're sure you can do the next one. So it's already a big thing. But otherwise, no. When you see how much money they have, it makes a huge issue. And on top of that, now with the new regulation, the voters have to say they want to vote for the Best International, rather than for the other categories you will receive automatically.
Yeah, no, it's definitely becoming, I guess, as the business is getting more international, so is the interest in the international titles.
And the Academy as well is trying to get more international.
Yeah. Okay, so back to, Howard, maybe you could kick this question off. So in terms of the film calendar, I mean, I know I was talking earlier about competitive natures, but again, in terms of looking at the health of the indie sector, a lot of these films can often come around that kind of January. They'll be released at around a certain time, December, January, the run-up to the Oscars. How healthy is that for the indie sector to be competing in this tiny window in the run-up to the awards campaign?
Well, I mean, first of all, not everything. Obviously, we have great opportunities often to release films like in the spring or even the summer, like counter programming, where the film's in like it's a much less competitive environment with similar films, and we often do that with really great success when we can. I mean, obviously, just by nature of the awards all coming within the same like couple months period time, and the critics lists that come in, that's so helpful to us. It's like all this free publicity, basically. It saves our at kind of the big studios, they have these big marketing departments and smaller publicity departments. We actually have a much bigger publicity department because we're basically relying on critics lists and awards and everything to buoy our films. So it's definitely helpful to release that. I don't know. I look forward to the end of the year. I'm like a total cinephile. I like having that period that I know that a lot of great movies are going to come out over the summer. That's when blockbusters often come out and family films. In October, it might be horror films. So I'm not that bothered by it, but we do in our slate, or a lot of our slate is awards type films and stuff, and it is somewhat spread out over the year.
Okay. So they don't sort of, the ones that are kind of coming out around that time aren't cannibalizing each other. Yeah. You think? Are they? Or
I think there's the ones that are coming out that time of year.
Yeah.
It's hard. You have to. It's like an analysis. You have to weigh whether you think that it can kind of survive in that period. But again, with the critics lists and the awards and everything to help. It's just a kind of analysis, depends on the picture, and we just try to find the best date for all of our films.
I think that was the exciting part about Everything Everywhere I know that's probably been mentioned a lot today, but is that it was a summer release, you know, and everyone was like, "Oh, is this an action movie?" You know, and then as momentum grew, it was like, "Is this an Oscar movie?" You know, and it was very wild and fun to see that ride. And I think my maybe naive hope is that indie world building, like the Daniels can do, will grow. And that we'll see more of that, and so thus more summer releases, maybe, or different, maybe even a January. Who knows? You know, like I just think
I think that film may have been March even,
Oh.
wasn't it? I think it
perhaps
was.
I
Yeah,
had
I
it
think it was. I mean, that's even more. You
even
know,
crazier, right?
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And I think Wes is, I mean, traditionally a lot of times has been released February, March,
Yeah.
right? And that's been then a long run up into the fall. So.
Yeah, not this last one that
No.
we did. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and again, when you have a so-called big movie, you can just announce you will do your release and no one will go in front of you.
Yeah.
So you do it earlier, you prepare that. And for the other one, anyway, you have no choice because anyway, you know you're going to have 15 in front of you on the same day.
Yeah. No, that's true. That's an interesting point. I mean, it leads me to kind of, obviously there's been some changes in terms of what makes an award-worthy film. I mean, obviously you had Parasite a few years ago, non-English language film, go win all the awards. Everything Everywhere All at Once was a very different type of film to what we're used to seeing win an Oscar. Why do you think, beyond, the Academy's clearly trying to change its how it is being perceived and what kind of films it wants to laud. What else is changing? I mean, because it's historically been a bit ageist, do you think there is more room for youthful films? Are there, what's changed in the last 5 years in terms of, what makes an award-worthy film?
Yeah, I would say it's not only the money. Put in the marketing and in the thing, because people are going for stories. They need stories, new stories, different stories. I think so. This has an impact, and Parasite was that. Okay, of course, they had the marketing campaign on the side, but not only. But again, you need to have the people watching the movie because otherwise it doesn't work.
Yeah. Rowan?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I'm really excited at the fact that mixed genre, and even maybe I would say mixed genre, maybe not straightforward genre, but mixed genre can win or be nominated for an Academy Award. And I think that began probably with Get Out. Obviously, that was sort of a landmark moment from an awards, well, in for many different reasons. But I think that absolutely, it's,
It's like I would say I'm just waiting now the next step when an animation will win the Best Picture.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the Academy have done a good job in the last few years, really bolstering their, members and being much more inclusive, and up to 10,000 people now. So that seems to be having an effect in the films that are being picked. So.
Yeah.
And also having the up to 10 films nominated for Best Picture, I think
that's really changed.
Really changed things.
Mm-hmm. So I'd like each of you, if you could, to maybe give me an example of a campaign for a film that you admired, that the campaign in the run-up to the awards season you really admired in recent memory.
I was going to say Everything Everywhere All at Once.
What was it about that?
Yeah, just that they came out, I believe it was March, they came out and they just sustained and held, and it was just, I think, like almost perfect campaign.
Yeah, for me, it'd be what I mentioned before. I think what Tom did on Parasite, winning the Palme d'Or, movie being out in the world, then pull back, and then this very sort of steady, smart campaign where, it almost became like a secret. So if you'd seen it, you weren't going to reveal it, and it became like a club you were in, and it became, it was just really smart. And then it was like, and then Bong himself being out there in front of it, he's funny and charismatic, and it's just a kind of really, I thought, well run operation, and then to win all the awards they did was amazing. So
what about you, Rowan? You said,
well, I'm not just saying this because you're on the stage here, but I was really excited about Promising Young Woman again, I speak from a talent-based production company. I thought what Margot Robbie's company did there was great. It was just super unexpected, I think, and you guys handled it artfully, and it stirred up a little controversy maybe even, and I always think that's a healthy thing, especially nowadays, I think maybe people have always liked controversy at awards ceremonies, but that was a nice one because it was about the film, not about something that happened on the stage. And I think that's what you want. You want people to talk about the movies. You want people to say, "Whoa, I didn't understand Lydia Tarr at all," or "No, I am Lydia Tarr." You want that kind of discussion. That's the fun part. So I liked Promising Young Woman. I was excited about Tara too. Really, really brown nosing here. And then to Leslie was just fascinating, and I was happy she advocated for herself, and it maybe showed, it sort of shed light on the process and how difficult it is for a small movie to make noise. Sort of what you were touching on and know really well how to break through.
I will take the example 2017 with Moonlight, A24 and La La Land in front of them. When La La Land from the beginning they said we're here to get the best picture, and Moonlight said no, they began slowly in Sundance, slowly they won. Then they went there and said no, as you said, Critics' Choice Awards, this award and this one, and at the end we all remember how it ended up during the show at the Oscars. But yeah, they ended up by winning.
That was incredible. They're all good examples. So to each of you as well, what then, with the kind of having had this discussion, what would for you be the perfect recipe for success in the awards game? Who wants to kick that one off? David, you look confident.
I don't know. That's an impossible question. I think,
Yes, I wish I knew that. We would have even more Best Picture nominations each year. I'll say one ingredient to that recipe that I think that we haven't discussed yet, which is it really makes a difference for the campaign if the actors and directors are available and work on the film. They really are the best ambassadors for the film. And obviously, there's a lot of important components of a campaign, but screening the film is the most important, I think, because it's you. First and foremost, people have to see the film, and Q&As are invaluable. Even the story that you told, or our performance, or anything like that makes a huge difference. And also interviews. Oftentimes we have films where unfortunately an actor has already booked another job during that period, and they're not very available, or the director's gone on to another film occasionally, and it's, I wish this happened more than it does. You hear that a director decided to push their next film or not take the film because they really believe in their film and they want to be fully available for an awards campaign.
I think authenticity to a certain extent. I think voters and audience can always pick up on something that they're feeling overly pushed on, and I think there's subtle ways to be authentic. But obviously, if there's not authenticity in the story and the filmmakers who are telling it, then that kind of doesn't ring true with the voters. It's hard for them. I think you can, and we've seen many examples of untold money being spent and people being pushed up, and it doesn't. So it's not necessarily about how much money you spend. It's just smart crafting, authenticity with the message, and I think having a good product is the key.
Yes, so it's easy to just do great movies. Meaning don't go for trendy, but go for story. Again, sorry, I mentioned story 20 times already.
It's very important.
Make them available to the voters, organize panels. It doesn't have to be the actors and the crew. Sometimes you can just organize panel with someone locally to treat the subject of the movie, not the movie itself. You can go around. Moonlight did it perfectly. They were doing plenty things, dinners, things, but with 2 people, 3 people, they went personal. They were talking to you. I think one super important point is tell the voters you want to win. Tell them it's gonna be your award, because sometimes people are not doing it. They say, okay, so you don't want it, so I'm not gonna vote for you. So that's a huge point, and it's super fun because it works. And then, learn the rules, master them, and break them.
Rowan.
Yeah, no, breaking the rules, that's a producer's job, essentially, certainly at the indie level, and I think that's right. I think I don't know, a perfect campaign probably doesn't exist. The closest recent one would be Everything Everywhere, I guess. But and what I liked about that campaign was that it was very crowd-driven, audience-driven, and that to me would be very exciting. And we constantly think about, again, mixed genre, mixed language. I know Sasha said subbed and dubbed. I love this new expression, and also indie world building and something where you can build a community online, because that to me is really. Not only does that help your movie and it feels the most authentic, it also gets more people watching awards, which is really critical if you zoom out. Like, if young people aren't watching the awards in 10 years, then the awards don't matter. And then, well, then your actor's value doesn't matter. Then how do you make your movie? And maybe we need to deconstruct that system a little. But definitely, from my standpoint, talent is important, you know? So it is exciting for me to, I think a lot about the audience and how they can drive a campaign or your movie in general.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Just to add some things, like I had that once and they were saying it's not a movie, it's a movement.
I like that. Okay, so I think we are going to open it up to some questions, if anyone has any out there. Okay, here at the front, please.
You touched on it a little bit about, Howard, about getting talent out there, and I was wondering if anybody had a brilliant idea for how to deal with agents or in contracts to get people freed up. I mean, it's a nightmare when you have to pay to shut down a production to get someone to fly in for a brunch or that kind of thing, because all those things matter in the campaign, but it's very, very difficult because if you're working with great people, they're usually pretty booked.
No, I wish I did know the secret. It's become, as you said, more and more difficult over the past couple years when things got better during the pandemic and things started going into production. Like, everybody went like at the same time, and there just wasn't. It's just, you know, actors are like basically stretched very, very thin. So it's definitely, it's a huge challenge. We are constantly on the phone with other companies, perhaps your company, and, you know, trying to work things out where somebody can leave a production for a couple days to come to a premiere, or, you know, or for a junket. It definitely helps when the agent or the lawyer, when they're making the deal for the next movie and stuff, carves that out in the deal.
That's what I was going to say, that you tend to know it when you start seeing the rushes, the dailies. You're like, oh, this is a different one. You know, that there's you do know early on if there's going to be a shot at something. So when do you start negotiating that with the agents? When do you, yeah.
Well, if the talent has a production company, that always helps. We're in their ear. No, but I'm only half kidding. I think they feel more ownership, you know? I mean, I've also seen examples where people aren't sort of fulfilling their obligations as a talent and producer. So I am well aware it swings both ways, but I do think sometimes that can help, and engaging, especially if the talent is really good on social media, that also can maybe help move things slightly, increasingly.
I will just answer. Pick talents who never been nominated, because you'll see they will do it, and they will do the job.
Oh no, they'll do it. But I'm saying that if they're in another production, they won't be let out of that production.
No, even for that, they can. I saw that happen, because it was the first time they could get the nomination, and they say, I'm going to do everything, and they will manage, because for the next production, it's going to be good as well to have the person being nominated for them. It will help the next movie.
So you're saying that they took a break in the production schedule? So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not on a daily basis or on a weekly basis, but for the big.
Yeah.
Because it will help the next production as well.
Because it will benefit that next production, right? Okay. Do we have any more questions?
I had one over here.
There you are.
Sorry, just to be asking. Both a comment and also a question to bring it even a little further, because of course the Academy, as you all spoke about, has been changing over the last 5 years with the inclusion of diverse and especially a lot of European international people who have also moved the needle towards those kind of films. And you talked about campaigning, and so my question is, do you want, I mean, because we see the Academy even every year, the rules of the campaignings are getting tighter and tighter. We saw the last one with the social media for the acting and all that. But do you also feel there should be a limit to the amount spent?
Interesting.
No.
Okay. Anyone else? You all agree?
I'm going to defer. I don't know. I have to really think about that. Yeah.
I mean, it came up a little earlier also in some of the other panels with Coda and all those kind of things, and the whole streaming war of campaigning has made some people. I mean, at least it's being written about every year when award season comes up, that how much money is spent by especially the streamers compared to the studio's pocket are not as deep. So there's always this about should it be a limit to the kind of money spent on campaigning?
Yes, if we put a limit on money on the budget of the movies.
I like that.
But I think a lot of people have spent a lot of money and haven't won awards, so I don't think it's necessarily about how much money you spend.
Too, right? Yeah. Okay. One last question, anyone? No? Anyone else? Okay. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for this wonderful panel.
Thank you, Diana.
Thank you.